So, you want to get into Leathercraft. Well, here are some 10 tips on how to make Leathercraft. Not expensive as a... Yeah, not very expensive. So, tip number 1 is to be patient. So, when you first get into a hobby, I know that when I first got into leatherwork, I was hyped, I was keen, and that sort of stuff. And when you are in that state, you can spend, you want to get the latest, you want to get the, the best equipment. But if you're on a budget, take your time. And that's what I did. I slowly worked up to the tools that I use now. And this is the thing, you don't need to get the most fancy equipment, so the first tip is to be patient. Okay, so just take your time. If you're on a budget, don't blow out all your money, because you might, in 2 months' time, you might decide that Leathercraft is just not for you. So take it slow. The second tip is to simplify leatherwork. So leatherwork is quite simple per se. Obviously there are, to do beautiful work, it requires a lot of effort and concentration and that sort of stuff. But in essence, the leatherwork is just pretty much just leather, thread, and glue and some beautiful edge work and that sort of stuff. So a couple of some of the things you might need, I can go into a detail where I go into more. I can do another video on these little subsections to go in more detail, because I want to keep this video short. But first thing is leatherwork. The first thing is leather. So what type of leather do you want to use? There's obviously chrome tan, there's vegetable tan. You also have different types of leather. So you got, bridal leather, you got, ostrich leather or crocodile. So there's all sorts of, what sort of leather do you want to use. What I would do if I was personally starting out all over again, I would just find the type of products that I would like to make, and I would just show that to, if I was going to buy leather from a supplier, I'd just show that to, hey, I want to make this. What sort of leather would I need? What sort of thread would I need? What sort of tools would I need to make that? The next thing is surfacing. So you need something to work on. So like a desk, cutting mat, marble if you want to skive. For cutting, you need, so these are all sorts of, if you simplify leather work, it's not as daunting as it might be. So the third thing is to improvise. So the workbench that I use, it was my grandfather's. I got that from his house. The desk that one of the desks over there is from my grandfather, and where I put my tools on here is a butcher's block that my dad used to use. So you don't need to go out and buy a fancy work desk. You can just simply improvise. So you see what you have around home. Go on social media. Go to an op shop. There's all sorts of ways you can cut your costs down, so you're not spending a lot of money. Also, as well, in the improvise section as well, see what tools you have that you can use. So, for example, I use this mallet that my dad had, so I didn't have to buy a mallet, like a leatherworking mallet. I use this tool, just this hammer to like hit the edges down. There's all sorts you could use, paint brushes just to apply your glue. To one of the tools that I use is just to cut. I just use a simple blade like this to cut. So I'm not using a sophisticated blade that's going to cost a lot of money. Obviously, if you have the money and the means to buy it, then there's nothing stopping you. But if you're on a budget and you want to slowly build up, then go with tools that you can improvise as well. And also, finally, another one is the hole punches that I have. They were my grandfather's. So again, you can improvise all sorts of tools. You know, you can use coins to trace for your edges. You know, you don't have to buy, you know, a tool just to get your edges round. You know, there's all sorts of ways you can go about it. You know, instead of using a bone creaser to get the on the pockets, I just use a simple, you know, pair of scissors to open up the pockets once they're glued down and stitched. So there's all sorts of ways you can improvise to avoid spending extra money. The fourth thing is this might sound like a contradiction, but cheap is not always better. So for example, comparing these two edge bevelers, you know, I got a very cheap one and I got a bit more of an expensive one from Weaver. This one here, this edge beveler was just, yeah, it was not very good, but this beveler works like quite effective. So this is a bit more expensive than this one, but it works. You know, it's worth it. So in some cases, it is better to go a little bit dearer, but don't just assume just because the tool is cheap, it's gonna be effective as opposed to a bit more expensive tool. So just keep that in mind. And also, just another thing, when you are picking out tools, don't just pick out tools blindly either, because this is one of the first edge bevelers that I ever bought, and I just bought it because I saw that you had to use edge bevelers. But this is the thing, like, compare these two edge bevelers. So this is a number 3 and this is a 0. So if you were to walk into a shop and you were to see two edge bevelers, yeah, you just want to know why you're buying it. Don't just buy it because, you know, you saw someone buy it. You know, buy like, look, make sure you understand why it's for, like what it's for. So for example, a 0 is to take a little bit off the edge, whereas a number 3 is to take a lot more. So cheap is not always better, and also just to know what you're buying as well. The fifth tip I have is actually quite effective. So research, probably like why you're on this video, but to research for tips and skills from other leather crafters. So YouTube is there's been an explosion of leather work over the past, you know, few years, 2 to 3 years. And you can watch leather workers on how they do their products, you know, and just by watching you can see the skills that they use, and you can take some of that skills and apply it into your own work. And you can, yeah, and I found that for me very effective, because that's one of the good things about YouTube, is that people are very willing to give you free tips that you can see. So it's not costing you anything to see these tips. The sixth tip is what do you want to create? So this is a important thing, because I remember the first time I went into a leather shop, I said to the guy that, you know, I want to get into leather work, and he said to me, you know, what do you want to create? And, you know, in that moment, and that's sort of what led me to just randomly buying tools from what I saw like leather crafters using. So what do you want to create? Do you want to create wallets? Do you want to create belts? Do you want to create key rings? Do you want to create briefcases? And, you know, the tools that you're going to need for them is going to vary. So for example, if you're going to make a belt, you're going to need, you know, a lot more punches. So you're going to need, you know, punches to punch where the buckle goes through, and holes to punch where the, you know, all sorts of things. So just be very wary of what you want to create. And this is the thing, like, if you find an item that you want to make on in the internet, just screenshot it and just take it to the supplier and just say, hey, I want to create this. What do I need? And yeah, so yeah. So the seventh tip is to ask questions. So for me personally, I've found that just asking a lot of questions you know, if I went into the leather shop and asked the guy there about some tips and on how to help me. I know that if I'm looking at making a new product and I find a picture that I like, I send a particular company a picture of it and say, hey, like, what do I need to make this, and they'll respond. So I send, if I ever need any questions or anything, I always flick Weaver a message, because they respond back straight away usually, and they help you out. And so yeah, so you just, if you find a good leather supplier that replies back and will help you out, it will be helpful for you. So you're not just spending money on just leather and tools and all that sort of stuff. So the 8th tip is to understand that you don't need fancy equipment to get going. So with me personally, when I make my templates, I just make them through a design program. But you can simply, if you just have I know that if you just use an L-shaped ruler and just a ruler, you can just make templates out of pieces of paper. If you have a card, if you want to make a wallet, just put the card and, you know, find out how far you want the stitch line to be, and yeah, so you can, just by using rulers and all that sort of stuff, you can simply design your own templates just on paper. Obviously it will take a lot more time, but you'll be able to, you know, it'll be a lot more cheaper than if you're buying, you know, programs and all that sort of stuff. Mind you, the programs aren't really that expensive, the one that I use, but if you're, you know, you don't want to spend a lot of money, yeah, you can just simply, you don't need fancy equipment to get going. Even, for example, you know, just to make, just to strop my tools, I made this myself. You know, I just glued some leather together, and I can strop my tools. Same with when I'm stitching, I just simply made my own stitching pad, whatever, just out of leather. So you can, this sort of goes back to improvising as well. But yeah, you don't need to buy, you know, all these sorts of equipment. You know, you can make them yourself, and yeah, so that sort of goes back into the improvising. Number 9 is to enjoy the process. So you're gonna find that when you start doing leather work, unless you're amazingly brilliant off the blocks, you'll find that your leather work probably might not be very, very good. So me personally, my first wallet, I can probably find it somewhere. My first wallet was this was just out of kangaroo scrap, and so just be prepared that when you start your leather work, it might not, you know, be absolutely perfect. You know, here's another piece of my early work, and I'll show you a wallet now. So this is what I can make, that I create now. So just be prepared that when you start leather work, you know, it's going to take a bit until you get to a quite competent level. But just if you just stick in there and just keep going, and just, you can get there. So if you just keep hammering those skills, that's what will, you know, improve your skills over time. So that's sort of what goes into the first number 1 as well, to be patient. So if you just have to stick it out. You just have to keep on going over and over again, and just, you know, you're gonna have little wins and little failures, but you just gotta keep going. And number 10 is quality over quantity. So how I started essentially is that, so what you want to do is that you want to focus on one product and just hammer and hammer and hammer until you get it right to your standard. So I know for me, I started off with just a basic minimalist wallet. I know that early on I made keychains, but I was like, you know, 4 or 3 or whatever. I think it was 4 I made. But the next thing I went on, it was minimalist wallet. So that's what I wanted to work on, and obviously I did make some bifolds, etc, etc. But you want to stay on one product, because if you start going onto a bifold or a trifold, or just or a billfold, you're just sort of going with you're not hammering those basic skills. And that's why I say that if you're starting off with a wallet, start small. So just like a minimalist wallet, you know, maybe a one pocket wallet, you know, like what I've just created just then. This is just a simple one pocket wallet, because each of those skills, so in this wallet is just the basic skills. You know, you got to get the stitching right, the edges right, and because it's small, it doesn't require a lot of leather compared to if you're making a bifold. If you're making a billfold, you're gonna need a lot more leather, and you're just gonna be, you know, you're just gonna be wasting a lot more leather if you're a beginner. But if you can start off with something little, you can just, you know, it's only 4 pieces of leather, but you can just really hammer those skills. And what I would focus on if I was, you know, starting all over again, is what I did focus on is that I made sure that the stitching was straight, that it was evenly, so it was perfectly uniform from the edge all the way around. You know, I'd make sure that the edges were burnished correctly. And if you just focus on those basic, just making sure that, you know, the stitching is right, the edges are right, and obviously, you know, that everything matches up fine, then when you go into your billfolds and your other projects, you can take those skills that you've learned from your minimalist wallet and just apply them to your larger product. So you're not wasting, you know, leather because you're ruining your billfold because you haven't, you know, practiced your stitching. So it's all these things where you just want to make sure that you're, you know, it goes back to, you want to focus on the quality over, you know, quantity. So yeah, so I got a whole list of minimalist wallets that I made over time, and it just goes back to repetition. And because of YouTube, you can watch other leather workers, so you can, you know, go back, watch their videos, see how they make things, and you can sort of bring them into your projects. So yeah, so what I'm going to do is, on my website, I'm going to have the template for this wallet, so you can buy it, you can print it out, and then you can just simply, if you don't have the time to, you know, measure out and measure how far the card should be from the wallet, you can simply just make this sort of, I can make a template up. If you want to buy it, you can buy it. If you don't want to buy it, you can make, and want to make it yourself, you can. But it just goes back to, yeah, it's just a lot of repetition. And once you got those basic tools, then you'll be fine. So I might make another video in the future just about simplifying leatherwork and some of the basic tools that you're going to need. But this is sort of an overview of the full craft so some tips you can take away from it. So if you want to subscribe to this channel, just so you're updated with the next video, and you can update it with all my other videos that are coming out in the future. And yeah, so enjoy leatherworking. Leave a comment if you like any questions. I'm happy to answer them. But yeah, just remember, be patient. You're gonna have to persevere a lot. So it's not gonna, your skills aren't gonna be sharp off the get-go. But if you just persevere and just remember some of the tips that I said, it'll be helpful for you. So I hope you found this video helpful, and yeah, subscribe, like, leave a comment, and yeah, see you next video.